Welcome back. It's the Urban Monk, Dr. Pedram Shojai. It's been a while. I am excited to be back podcasting. I decided I'm just going to podcast once in a while when there's really important things to talk about. And I have been on the phone a lot with my new friend, who's our guest today, just talking about all the stuff that's happening in the world. Ancient Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. Well, here we are. So there's been some very interesting dialogue happening behind the scenes that I wanted to bring forth and share with you because it has to do with everything. It has to do with your body, it has to do with your mind, it has to do with your money, it has to do with your livelihood. And, people don't really talk about this stuff. I mean, we talk about personal development and what we talk about at the Urban Monk. Some of you know I was in the process and, we're making a film called The Great Heist with my new friend, Robert Kiyosaki. And the film has been basically laying out some of the stuff that's happening right before our eyes with all this crap happening in the financial markets. And so we need to jump the gun. We need to jump out and talk about it. I want to share this with you. So without further ado, Robert Kiyosaki, welcome to the Urban Monk.
Oh, looking forward to it. Thank you very much. It's really been interesting. It's like it seems like you and I came together at the perfect time. Doesn't it seem that way?
It really, really has been poetry in that because, these conversations started to kind of bubble up as you and I started getting really kind of, serious into, the development of the script and all the things that we're doing with this film. And then right before our eyes, yes, there's a virus. Yes, there's, real crap going on. Yes, stay healthy. But, cover your back pocket, man, because right before our eyes, there are some nasty things happening in markets and with all the money that's being printed and that our kids are going to, or kids are going to be paying off. And so I really wanted to get you on the show and bring this conversation, forth for my audience because most people don't even think about money. And that's a problem, right? Because it's like a fish not thinking about water. They're swimming in it. Everything, the transactions, everything we do, the food, the shelter, all the things that we do in our lives require this thing called money. Yet it's this enormous blind spot for people in our world. And yet it's the number one thing they're stressing about. So, and I know this is your study. You've been at this for a very long time.
Right. Money is, the story of Rich Dad, Poor Dad is about my poor dad, real dad, a PhD. And then my rich dad who never went to school. And it is the contrast of having two dads growing up in Hawaii that gave me, let's say, two different points of view on the subject of money. And that was where I started at age 9. And I kept wondering, why doesn't our school system teach us about money? And that question haunted me still haunts me. And then when I see this crisis going on right now, my suspicions only increase, as you and I have talked about.
Yeah, justifiably so. So let's get a little bit more backstory. Rich Dad was the non-PhD. For those of you, look, Robert's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is best-selling book for gajillions of years in every country, and he's kind of been around and been one of the key figures in speaking about this for a very long time. For anyone in my audience who hasn't read the book or know about it, let's just do like a 2-minute tour of that gestalt so that then we could jump in and do a deeper dive, if you will.
Right. The story of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, growing up in Hawaii, I'm an Asian, Japanese American, and I went to a rich white kid school in Hawaii. And it kind of dawned on me is how come they're rich and I'm not? And that's where the whole thing started. So I go home to my poor dad, a PhD from Stanford, University of Chicago, and Northwestern. And I said, how come we don't learn about money at school? And he says, because the government won't let us teach it. So although I'm only 9 years old, I was going, que pasa? Why is that? So I asked my 4th grade teacher, she gave me some religious BS, the love of money is the root of all evil. And I said, well, it may be evil for you, but I'd like to have some. And
I want a new bike too.
Yeah, so it was all this confusion. Then I go to Sunday school, and I find out that the same thing. Money is evil. I'm going, holy mackerel! So why am I going to school? And so that was this huge, you know how kids are. They just ask these questions that parents can't answer. So my rich dad was my best friend's father, who never went to school because his father died when he was 13, and he took over the family business. This was in a little town called Hilo, Hawaii. And so he learned money in the real world running his family business. And today, when you look at Waikiki Beach, you know, the Hyatt Regency hotels and all that stuff, his family owns. So he went from absolutely nothing to one of the richest men in the state of Hawaii. Just, you know, I just couldn't believe, what did he know that my PhD father did not know? And that was the genesis of my life study. And the word study is an interesting word because everybody says they study. Like I studied Japanese, I still can't speak it. I studied French, I still can't speak it. Studied Spanish, I still can't speak it. So a lot of people study, but they learn nothing. And that's the problem with going to school.
So did your poor dad, I mean, one of the intriguing parts of this is he had so bought into the system and the belonging and having the PhD and, you know, so he's broke, but he's a PhD and he's in the system. It's almost like he didn't want to learn about money, right? What he had been taught about money had jaded his belief system around money. And because it became a belief system, suddenly he was averse to learning about how to, you know, actually have money and make money and keep money and do all the things that, you know, would have put him in a better situation.
Yeah, well, when you and I get together, there's a lot of spiritual connotations. Like when I was in Sunday school, is that, you know, I'm not very good. I flunked out of school and I flunked out of Sunday school also. But, you know, they said something about Christ throwing out the moneylenders from the temple or something like that. And so that was a sign that money was evil. And so there was all of these things. Well, but when you study, actually, which I never did, you study the Bible, money is a subject mentioned more than any other single subject except in school. It's pretty interesting because there's this spiritual connotation and evil associated with money. So today we have this battle between the capitalists and the socialists and the academic elite and all this stuff. And we still learn nothing about money. So when you and I got together, it was just, you know, to kind of demystify this subject called money. Why don't we teach it at school?
And why is everyone just, you know, looking away right now while their pensions are getting looted and, you know, their stocks have no value? And, you know, you work your whole life for this thing called money. And then in one broad stroke, suddenly 80% of your money or your wealth or whatever you thought you had is gone. And somehow you just, you know, learn to accept it because you don't understand the markets. And that's really one of the major things I wanted to kind of sound an alarm on. And wanted to talk about today is just like, holy crap. You know, like my father, you know, he was a civil engineer. He worked for the county, you know, doing building bridges that, you know, keep people alive and making sure. And, you know, a ton of his money was in pension funds. Right. And I've been telling him for years, I'm like, hey, man, I don't know if your pension's going to make it. And now that this thing is happening, what a great way to kind of brush all of those poor investing mistakes and all the crap that has happened with pensions that has been right under the radar, under a rug, and be like, yeah, see, coronavirus, it destroyed everything. Sorry.
That's what you and I started talking about. That's when we came together about 2 years ago now. And I was a student of, I was never a student. I was trying to say, I studied a lot of things and learned nothing. My grandparents spoke Japanese. I still can't speak Japanese. You know, I studied it, but I can't speak it. And most people don't study money. Well, that was my study. And so I understand money, but every time I talk about money, these, you know, eyeballs glaze over, or I can hear my Sunday school teacher or my fourth grade teacher saying, the love of money is the root of all evil. I'm going, where the heck did that come from? Who teaches us that? And so that's why you and I want to talk today about spirituality and this subject called money. Because I don't think this crisis is an accident. I'm not saying the pandemic isn't real, but it's part of an overall plan to make us weaker financially.
You studied with a gentleman by the name of Buckminster Fuller back in the day. Bucky, for those of you who know Bucky Fuller's work, he's a genius. The Bucky Ball, the geodesic dome. I mean, that's just one of the things he was known for. But the guy was prolific. He wrote a lot about a lot. And he had this book, a very prophetic book called Grunch of Giants. And that's what kind of set Robert off on his path. So, Rob, give us a minute or so on Grunch and Bucky, so that we can kind of contextualize where we're going here.
Right. If I could go back further to in the 50s, my poor dad, again a PhD academic type, Fuller was his hero. So my dad would have me sit down, and we'd put little dowels together, medical dowels, and we would build triangles, squares, tetrahedrons, icosahedrons, dodecahedrons. And I didn't know why my poor dad was so enamored with Bucky, but anyway, that was kind of my home study when I was a kid. Then when I was in college in New York, I went to military school. The Expo 67 was on in the World's Fair in Montreal, Canada, the World's Fair on the Future. So Bucky's geodesic dome was the U.S. pavilion at the World's Fair. So my dad said, go check it out. Because he's in Hawaii, I'm in New York. So I hitchhike all the way to Montreal. And I go into this geodesic dome. So you can look it up, anywhere. But the U.S. pavilion at the Expo 67, the World's Fair in the Future. So I didn't meet, that was in 1967. I didn't meet Fuller till 81 in Kirkwood, California, right near Lake Tahoe. And my life changed. I met this guy. I'll just tell you, I still remember the words profoundly. These opening words. There was about 100 of us in this classroom. Most of them were hippies, I was a Marine pilot in Vietnam, so hippies were not kind of my cup of tea. So anyway, so they're all sitting there. They're all baby boomers. And Fuller opens up with this statement. He goes, ladies and gentlemen, we are the news. I go, what the hell is he talking about? Then he went on to say, this is what's in the news is the death of the old. And what we're doing today is new. So Pedram and I, what we're doing today is new. This is new. What's in the news with a pandemic is the death of an old. And so the reason you and I wanted to get together, with Grunch of Giants and all this is, what is the new? What's the future hold for us? So the Grunch of Giants didn't come out. I studied with Fuller for 3 years, 81, 82, 83. And 2 weeks after the last time studying with him in 83, Fuller passed away. And a few months later, his book, Grunch of Giants, came out. Grunch stands for Gross Universal Cash Heist. It's how the ultra-rich rip our lives off, our money off, via our money. And suddenly, what the Buddhists would call, not religious, so I'm not pushing a religion here, what the Buddhists call is a satori moment. A satori moment means when the past, present, and future, as a flash comes into your head, you go, holy mackerel. And suddenly, when I read Grunch of Giants, this is in 83, I could see the past, the present, and the future. And that's when I became a student for the first time. And I started studying this subject called money and the grunch and how is our wealth stolen via our money? How are our lives ripped off via our money? And so that was in 83. And today with this coronavirus, you can have glimpses of what Fuller was saying back in 83. As Pedram says, what happened to our pensions? Who stole our pensions? How come we're on Social Security? Why do we need Medicare? Why are we so needy for money? Why is there why do our schools teach us nothing about money? Was it to weaken us spiritually? Spiritually. So we're so needy and desperate, the government can give us money, Social Security, Medicare, pay off our student loan debt, bail out the rich. Spiritually, we got weaker. And that's why Pedram and I got together for our documentary, which is now put on hold.
Yeah, we can't film until we can film, but we can certainly talk about it. We got the whole thing ready to go. And in front of our very eyes, we're watching the premise of a lot of this, of where the heist happens and where your money gets looted. It was almost like, holy crap. there it is. It's happening right now. The Fed is buying up every asset it possibly can. What does that mean? And we'll talk to Robert about that, right? The pensions were already going bankrupt and people were being, given the bad news, and they were buying corporate bonds, and the corporates were buying their own stock buybacks. And then the, CEOs would just, golden parachute out with $200 million. What does that mean? And so all these, unless you understand what's happening with money, you don't understand the looting that's happening right in front of your very eyes. So let's just get into a couple of the major points on this, and then let's go back to what's happening today, Robert, if you can.
Sure. Well, the biggest thing is, why are people like Iger of Disney and Steve Burke of NBC Universal, these big CEOs, why are they parachuting out today? Do they know something's coming? And why don't our schools teach us about money? Why are the upper 1% so rich and everybody else is so poor? Why do we have homelessness all over the U.S., once the richest country in the world? Could it be our money? Why do our schools not teach us anything about money? So I think what Fuller was saying was that in his Grunch of Giants, it was to kill our spirits so that we would take any kind of handout from the government so the government could control us. So saying it another way, are we shifting from capitalism to socialism, which is Bernie Sanders, AOC? I'm not religious, Elizabeth Warren. All of these guys said, well, we've got to give people money. Is our spirit so weak that we're finally going to accept socialism and are already entering communism? And communism is when the government or the banks control our businesses. So this bailout of Boeing and all the airlines, part of the condition is that the Fed and the government will own these businesses. That's communism. So we go to socialism, which is the redistribution of wealth. And so now we're saying, okay, the rich have to give us money, or the Robin Hood theory of money. The rich have to pay for us. The rich have to pay for the homeless. So I have many people coming up to me, friends and family, well, you have money, why don't you give me some? Their spirits are so dead because they're out of money. And meanwhile, Boeing's going to be bailed out, but the government's going to own it. That's called communism or oligarchies. And I think that's really what's kind of happening if you can step back and look at it. Now, I catch hell for that because, you're a conspiracy guy. I said, well, just take a look and see what's happening. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually kind of in plain sight. And it's not that long ago. I mean, you fought for this country in Vietnam, and there's a generation of, men and women who went to fight for this country in World War II. And there was the fascist Nazis and the fascist Mussolini, right? And then there was the communists and Stalin. I mean, Stalin probably killed 30 million of his own because he said so. Right? I mean, we all know what the Nazis did. We all know what Mussolini did. And so, a lot of people went and fought for what America stands for, which is self-determination and freedom and the ability to kind of, determine your own fate. And what's happening now is there's a very aggressive fascist takeover. There's this virus, everyone stay home. Oh, here's your liberties gone. Here's your Second Amendment rights gone. Here's this right gone. It's a very slippery slope to then suddenly living in a totalitarian environment like China. 6 million subscribers to China Mobile are suddenly gone. Did they all die, or did they get their permissions yanked? That's a question we'll never know because the Chinese will not let you know. You know what you're allowed to know in a country that doesn't have free press. So these times are, like when there's blood on the streets, the fascists come out and they start seizing power. And this is why it's really important to understand this isn't just about money. This is about your rights. It's about your freedom. It's about your self-determination. And it gets looted through your money, because if you don't have some and your kids are hungry, you will stand in a bread line and you will beg and you will do whatever it takes to feed your family, wouldn't you?
Amen. And the question I ask people listening, I don't mean to be a fascist about it, but if you're hurting financially, if you're afraid right now of not having enough money, you're feeding yourselves or your family, or having enough toilet paper, or civil unrest and all this stuff, how did you get here? What did you not know? Because let me say it another way. there's been a lot of people warning people that this was coming, like Chicken Little, the sky is falling, but people didn't listen to them. They're called Cassandras. A Cassandra was a Greek mythology of a woman who had the gift of prophecy, but her counter was that nobody ever believed her. And so for years now, I've been saying, look, this is coming. I ask people to read Grunch of Giants, to read Road to Ruin by Rickards, The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. And people say, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, it's here today. And so, in many ways, I was either Chicken Little or Cassandra. But if you're hurting today, what prevented you from preparing for this? You see, right now, there's people who are doing better than ever. They're making money. I'm making money hand over fist. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying because I was prepared for this. But because I didn't trust my government, I didn't trust my education, and I really think they're trying to take away my freedoms. And I was a Marine pilot in Vietnam, and I fought for freedom. But when I was in Vietnam, I realized I was fighting for Standard Oil in Vietnam. My old company I worked for, because oil runs the world. If you are open your eyes, since 1914, oil has been the thing we fight for. So there was in 1914 when Winston Churchill committed to step into World War II. He said, "I want one city, and that's Mosul." And Mosul is one of the biggest oil reserves in the Far East. Today, we're still fighting for Mosul. It's oil.
Yeah. World War I, but yes.
And so it's always been about oil. So you look at where are the weapons of mass destruction that George Bush, President Bush, said there were, that Colin Powell said there were. There's no weapons of mass destruction. The weapons of mass destruction were us killing all those, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of Middle East people we've killed. We've killed more people now than ever before. But there was no weapon of mass destruction. And like this coronavirus is kind of that WMD. I'm not saying the virus doesn't exist. I'm saying it's an excuse to take our liberties, freedoms, and kill a lot of people.
It's almost worth taking this 2-minute detour here. So Nixon takes us off the gold standard. There's nothing anchored to the US dollar anymore. And then there was this deal with the Saudis to link the petroleum purchases and everything in the US dollar. And then the petroleum dollar became the standard for all energy. I mean, energy runs the world, obviously. And so we've literally, and there's papers on this I could share with our audience, we've literally had to fight wars to prevent anyone from transferring their purchase of oil in euros because the dollar has to stay in that position of power, or else the whole damn thing crumbles. And so when you start looking at the geopolitics of why we fight these wars and why the dollar has been tied to petroleum and how we can't let that go, you start seeing what China and Russia have been doing to jiggle that free. You start to actually see some like rationality in some of the moves happening in the news. Right? This is a war. It's just being fought economically over petroleum and control of currency. And again, I didn't know any of this crap, right? I just started reading it, a couple of years ago. And, you can't look away. Once you look at it, it's like, oh man, no one taught me this in school.
Right. And the world changed, in 1944 when the Bretton Woods Agreement was created. It was the end of as World War II was ending and they knew we had won. So there was a Bretton Woods Agreement in New Hampshire or someplace like that. But IMF was formed and the World Bank was formed. All of those things are part of Grunch. And the Federal Reserve Bank is part of Grunch. And that was Fuller writing about Grunch of Giants. So in 1983, after he passes, and I'd been studying with him for 3 years, and Grunch came out, that was a Satori moment. I could see past, present, and future. And I could see today coming. So that's why 25 years ago, I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, asking the question, why don't we teach money at school? And I got crucified by all the intellectuals who ran, like the big publishing houses. They said, you don't know what you're talking about, because what I said in Rich Dad, Poor Dad Your house is not an asset. The rich don't work for money. Savers are losers. And I got crucified. And so the book had to be self-published because no publishing house would touch it because they're all part of Grunch, academia. So then 2 years later, it makes the New York Times bestseller list. And a woman named Oprah Winfrey calls. She says, hey, who is this guy, Rich Dad, Poor Dad? So I was in Australia at the time, and they called my wife, Kim, in Phoenix, and they said, where is your husband? He said, well, he's in Australia. So I just got there, and Kim calls up, and she says, hey, Oprah wants you on her show. And I said, who's Oprah? See, I'm a Marine. Marines don't watch Oprah. So real men just don't watch that stuff. So I'm out there having a good time. And Kim says, get your ass home now. So I had to fly. I just got there. They'll fly another 1,000 hours back to Phoenix and then on my way to Chicago. And in, I think, the year 2000, I was already on the New York Times bestseller list. So I'm on the New York Times bestseller list. I walk in, I sit on stage with the most powerful woman on earth, and I'm going, holy mackerel. So I went from nobody to suddenly this overnight success at 50-something years old. I'm going, so that's why Pedram and I talk about it on the spirituality side. There has to be a God someplace. I'm not real religious, but that stuff, I was just doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And Bucky Fuller always said to me, it's not what you want to do. Don't do what you love. The question is, what does God want done? And so back after 83, I had to think about that. I went, what does God want done? And I didn't really know. So in 1996, I created the cash flow board game, and I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And apparently that's what God wants done, because my life changed overnight. I walk on the stage. There was 2 chairs on the middle of the stage in Chicago, Harpo Studios. And I sit down and I go, holy mackerel, what happened to my life? So that's why Pedram and I, being the urban monk and Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's a very spiritual mission, although most people wouldn't see it as spiritual because I'm teaching people to be rich.
Let's talk about money. When I talk to my patients in this coronavirus conversation, I talk about resilience. I talk about building up your capacity, building up your immunity, building up your vitality. So whatever comes at you, you have the resilience to fight it off. Financially, people have no idea. People don't know what their balance sheet is. They call their accountant at the end of the year and say, I don't know, how much do I owe? How much do I, hopefully I get some back. And so there's zero IQ when it comes to that. And you created this board game so people could teach people about how to think about money. And that board game, I've met now, like folks, this is separate, right? Like I've met people who run groups of people, tens of thousands of people around the world that get together and play this board game and are learning about how to think about money. And the most hilarious part of it is sometimes you get these like economics professors that come in and start poo-pooing and talking about how good they are at stuff, and they suck at this game. And they're arrogant and they're dismissive, and yet they suck at it. And you're like, wait, you have a PhD in economics and you don't understand just basic cash flow. And this has been a groundswell. Like I've been watching this movement for a while. I read Robert's books years ago. And now we hang out and we're much more entwined in what we're talking about. But I've been watching, and it's like, holy, this is a groundswell from people saying that book changed my life. This is why I've met so many people that have money and have real assets now because they learned about money instead of looking away. And that to me is, again, that's not a top-down system. That's a ground-up system. And we live in a time right now when Robert talks about spirituality that, look, this whole shit show is falling apart. The house is crumbling, and we have an opportunity right now to recreate a world out of the ashes of this pandemic. And God willing, we don't lose, millions of people and all the human suffering component. But this has given us an amazing opportunity to rethink how we do things, rethink how we interact with the environment, rethink how we think about money, because they just print the stuff. They just make it up. It's an idea. So, Robert, for a lot of my audience looks away from money. You know, they've all bit hook, line, and sinker into this money is evil thing. I did too, man. I'm a recovering hippie, right? I was a confused communist for years. I didn't understand that the number one stressor in my life was money. And if I just figured it out, I could do greater things in the world, right?
Right.
And so how can we start rethinking about money coming out of the ashes of this thing that we're all experiencing right now?
Well, first of all, as you said, money in 71 stopped being money. It became a debt credit tax system. That was a capital formation structure. But people don't have the economics professors have no idea what I'm talking about because they're not entrepreneurs, they're employees. The next thing is this: it's not money that's evil. It's what are you doing for your money that may be evil.
Right.
So let's say I'm selling drugs and I'm a multi-millionaire. I think that would be evil. So it's nothing to do with money. But the worst part about it is it's our leaders who are evil. The Federal Reserve Bank, the U.S. Treasury, Wall Street, the banking system, and all this. That's why I said Bob Iger of Disney just parachuted out. Steve Burke of NBC Universal, the largest media company in the world, they're parachuting out right now because they know the end is near. Meanwhile, the students of America and the world are deeply in debt with student loan debt. Student loan debt is now twice as, 70% bigger than the subprime mortgage of 2008. And we're screwing our kids. And then we ripped off the pensions of the baby boomers. And we have everybody dependent upon Social Security and Medicare. So the whole thing here was by not having financial education in our schools, which went back to 1904 with the formation of the General Education Board, run by Rockefeller, Morgan, and those guys, we now have a generation who are spiritually so weak, they'll do anything for that government paycheck. And I started like Social Security, Medicare, and all those things. We're so spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically weak. And if you don't have money today in this crisis, then the only thing I can say is please look in the mirror and ask yourself, what did I not know? How did I get myself in this position? Because if you're struggling financially, afraid of losing a job, you've lost your job, all that other stuff, or you can't retire, what didn't you know? But right now, you're so desperate, you'll take anything they give you. And the checks are starting to go out. They started this in China. The amount is exactly the same, $1,200. That's the exact same the Hong Kong people received. And I think if you look at what happened, Hong Kong was rioting, Paris was rioting in Santiago, Chile. And now all of a sudden, martial law is in place. You have to stay distancing for everybody else. All the mobs disappeared. So I think this is, martial law, fascism. But when I say that, I get crucified. How dare you say that? I'm so afraid of dying. I said, okay, I am too. They can't even think. So I created the cash flow board game because a cash flow board game versus going to school requires 4 intelligences. One is mental. Second is emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is the most powerful of all the intelligence. Like if you're afraid right now, you can't think when you're mental. And if you're afraid or you're angry, that's emotional. So there's mental, emotional, physical. Like you can't learn to play golf unless you swing a golf club. So most of our teachers today are just mental, but they can't swing a golf club. But the most powerful of all is spiritual intelligence. And that's why my wife Kim and I created the cash flow board game, because by actually playing the board game, we have an online game, but it's not as good as the board game. And this was in 1996, we created the cash flow board game. So you could actually learn how money moves. It's called cash flow. See, if cash is flowing out, you're going broke. If cash is flowing in, you're getting rich. And right now, most people, their cash is flowing out. They're terrified. Emotionally, they're screwed. They can't think. So the reason that what Pedram was talking about, we have thousands of these cash flow clubs where people get together with people and teach people about money. And all we teach them is a financial statement: income, expense, assets, liabilities, statement of cash flow. That's what the rich know how to do: income, expense, asset, liability, statement of cash flow. It's called accounting. So we made accounting the most boring subject. I went to business school, most singularly boring subject on planet Earth, taught by an idiot who didn't know anything about accounting. And we made it fun. So people have fun, people teaching people. The academics don't like my game because it makes them look stupid. I used to play this game in schools. It's disgusting. Academics are some of the most stupid people financially. Good people, but they're all like my poor dad. They don't know anything about money. The economics teacher, the accounting teacher, the finance guys, they don't know anything, but they know all the mental answers. They know the book, they're textbook smart, but they can't do anything, and they're terrified of losing job security, and so their spirits die. If you're being paid to do something you don't want to do, spiritually, you're a deficit. It's not about doing what you love, it's doing what God wants done. That's the difference.
Amen. Amen. Look, if you're not in a good cash position right now, welcome to the club. There's millions and millions of people that are waking up to saying, oh my God, what happened? Okay, great. Those were the mistakes of the past. What are you going to do starting today? I have so many people, I have friends, successful people, intelligent people that are, doing well in life and all this. And everyone I know is they're doing these Zoom cocktail hours and having happy hours and just drinking with their friends because they don't know what the hell to be doing with their time right now. How about this? Read a fucking book. How about this? Meditate. How about this? Exercise. People are feeling sorry for themselves because they're stuck at home having time when a month ago, all they did was complain about not having time. What about learning how to get yourself out of the rat race? What about learning how to calm your mind and build resilience psychologically and emotionally and spiritually? God's given us a gift. This whole thing right now, it's crazy. Why are you not taking advantage of this time to learn about money, to get yourself in peak physical fitness, to pick up a meditation practice, to step into the future you want to step into instead of being back on your heels and feeling sorry for yourself, right? This is a choice for every single one of us right now.
Amen. Another thing too, I'll give you the differences. I'm not really religious. I'm an academic failure. I have a Bachelor of Science degree, which stands for BS. But other than that, the difference between there's four intelligences: mental, emotional, spiritual, physical. If your emotions are out of control right now, you're screwed. That's not spiritual. So the way I was taught, I'm not good at this because I get in trouble with the religions. If you're praying, that's mental. Spiritual is silence. So praying is you talking to God. Meditation is God's talking to you silently. So these people right now who are so afraid, they can't shut their brains up. Oh, please send me money. Please take care of my kids. Please do this. Those are your emotions talking through your brain. That's not spiritual intelligence.
When you are in duress, you come from a part of the brain called the amygdala, which is responsible for getting you in or out of a bad situation, puts your sympathetic nervous system in overdrive. The blood drains out of your brain, goes to your hindbrain and to the big muscles that help you with survival. You have emotional responses, and fear will drive you. Look at what's happening with every freaking headline out there. They're almost designed to put you in the amygdala and say, help me, help me, help me. And look, if you're dumping your stocks right now, I promise you there's a rich guy standing there waiting to pick it up with a smile on his face. Don't make emotional decisions right now out of duress. This is the time to silence your mind, to really bring the parasympathetic nervous system back into dominance so that your prefrontal cortex allows you to have a negation of impulses, higher moral reasoning. People turning into complete monsters right now and attacking each other, which is insane, and allowing you to make decisions that are better supporting a future that you can stand behind. And, these headlines, all this news, it puts people into panic. When you're panicked, you give away the farm. And someone is waiting right now with a knife and fork in hand to take the farm, right? So be very, very cautious about the decisions you make right now, because it's almost designed to get you to play on tilt like a poker player who's losing and give away all your assets to, whether it's the bank, the Fed, whoever's out there, some rich investor who's waiting to pick up your house for nothing. These are times to be calm and collected, not to be reactive.
Well, what Pedram is saying is, you look at the best teachers today are on YouTube, not in colleges. I mean, those I wouldn't send my kid to college. If you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer, you got to go to college. But you want to be rich, they're not in school. They're all poor dads. They're like the Federal Reserve Bank. 900 PhDs who are broke. I mean, those guys work for Grunch, Gross Universal Cash Ice. The Federal Reserve Bank is not a bank. It's a cartel owned by private citizens. Wake up. And then you go to college and all they do is put you deeper in debt. That was in 2009. Obama took over the student loan program and turned it over to the U.S. Treasury. And the average guy would go, what does that mean? Well, it means the U.S. government would back up the debt. They became the guarantor on that debt. So all the banks would then just give you all the loans you wanted because the government was going to back you up. And that's Social Security. That's all these bailouts right now. The government says we're going to back you up. They're going to start giving $1,200 checks. Everyone's going to back you up. They're going to give me a couple of $100,000, thank God. But because I'm an entrepreneur, there's a difference. But if you don't know the laws and the study of money, then you're in trouble just because you might think money is evil. Well, it's ignorance that's evil. That's
Amen.
The problem.
Look, in the monetary system, I'm not here to defend the credit/debt/tax system that was created. I was just born into it, man. Right. So the moral of the story is, if you can't blow up the Death Star, how do you build your own resilience and get strong so that then you don't get taken out by it? And then collectively, we have more and more people from the ground up who are not desperate and dying and willing to give anything over to the government just to basically stand in a bread line and build power to the people back up. How do the 99% grow out of this and develop a resilience that will change the world versus, basically just taking this on the chin and giving up, right? And that's the moment in history we're in. And that's why I think it's really, really important to wake up to this. If you've been looking away from money, and money has been one of the biggest stressors in your life, put two and two together, folks.
What does school teach about money? Let me say something else about books. Like there's audio books. There's if you really want to understand how you're being ripped off, there's a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. Just strap the headphones on and listen to it. Your eyes will go, holy mackerel. This guy, Edward Griffin's a brilliant guy. Another is my partner on another book coming up. His name is James Rickards, The Road to Ruin. You'll find out how this crisis is not an accident. The crisis is an accident. No, the crisis is a crisis. But as they say, never Rahm Emanuel, Obama's buddy. I'm not Republican or Democrat. I just don't like communists. They say, never let a severe crisis go to waste. That's exactly what Rickards is saying. So what people wait for are these crises so we all get panicked. Again, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. When you're panicked, they can sell anything to you. So what happens is the moment you're panicked, like 9/11 was the Patriot Act. Obamacare was Obamacare. And now they're going to take more of our freedoms away. So when these crises happen, the people that are grunge ratchet down, so they take away more of our freedoms. That's where Social Security came during the last Depression. That's where Medicare came during the Great Society under Kennedy and Johnson. They keep making us weaker and weaker and weaker so they can take more of our freedoms away. Now you can say, oh, that's a bunch of BS. And so, okay, fine. But why are you so worried about money? Why did school teach you this? How did that happen? Is it an accident? Oh, no, they just forgot about money. No, when I began studying after I read Grunch of Giants, and that book's on audio tape too, it's eye-opening. Open your eyes up. So after I read Grunch of Giants, I went to ask myself that question, why doesn't school teach us about money? Well, it goes all the way back to 1903 when the General Education Board was founded by Rockefeller and Morgan. Look at all of our school systems. Most of our major universities are run by robber barons. There was Duke University, Vanderbilt, Harvard is J.P. Morgan School of Accounting. The University of Chicago is John D. Rockefeller School. There's Stanford University. There's Vanderbilt. All of these schools have, as Fuller said, there's one reason for these guys taking over the school system was they're looking for the best and the brightest and make them employees to run their corporations. If you understand what education's real job is to have you make the rich get richer, but you're never going to get rich. So I'm being ripped off right now. And the way out is through our spirits. Exactly as Pedram is saying, you've got to be so strong spiritually right now. Otherwise, you're going to cave in when they say, okay, we're going to bail out the pension system. Your dad's not going to be able to retire. He's going to be on the streets. So you have to take your dad in, or your mother in, or your sister, or your brother. They're weakening our spirits via our money.
It's a great way to dump off Medicare and put it into a different system. It's like they bankrupted Medicare and Social Security. So now they're going to dump the parents back into our houses. And God, look, I love my parents. They could live with me forever, but that's not the point. They paid into Medicare and now they're getting screwed. They paid into Social Security and now they're getting screwed. And so it's just this entire thing with the pensions and Medicare, Social Security, student loans. You look and it's basically like, you're being strangled from every direction. And somehow every time there's a crisis, it doesn't work out for the average person. Like this $2 trillion everyone's in line for right now, my kids and their grandchildren will be paying taxes on debt service that will never, ever be able to be made up for because it's higher than GDP. So we've basically created a system where our future generations are going to be paying off mistakes of the past in perpetuity, and there will be less and less available for them to enjoy their lives and for them to actually have freedom. And that terrifies me, right? That's really what we're looking down the barrel of.
So that's why back in '83, when I read Grunch of Giants, my wife Kim and I, what we had to do was prove we knew what we were talking about. I'm not a teacher. Teachers teach what they don't know or understand. My poor dad taught subject he knew nothing about. Most accounting teachers, most finance teachers, they don't know what they're talking about because they only know mentally. They don't know it emotionally, spiritually, physically. But I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I created the cash flow game only after Kim and I had retired. It took us 10 years to retire. And we had no pensions, no 401k, no jobs, none of that stuff. None of the things the government offered. We said, can we do it on our own? That's what we did. So we created the cash flow board game in 96. And 97 wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Like I said, when every academic in the big publishing houses said they didn't know what I was talking about. Wall Street Journal comes after me all the time, because they work for Grunch. Your financial planner works for Wall Street. I don't have any stocks, bonds, mutual funds, or ETFs because I don't need them. As an entrepreneur, I can create my own assets. I don't need Wall Street or the government's money. Most of my money is made all over the world. I'm a global citizen. And you can do the same thing too if you just change the way you look at the world. But that takes spiritual, not just mental, emotional. And if you're afraid, then meditate for a while, get calm. Right?
Well, and let's just be very clear. Robert did not get $1 million check to say, here you go, son, here's a pat on the ass, go make more. Robert scrapped up from the ground up and, had a series of fails and learned the game and, is basically got scar tissue to prove it. Right. Same here. I mean, I was a refugee of a revolution, came over here, started from scratch and hustled my way up to understanding all these things. And live life by example.
Yeah. And if you want to understand, my wife, Kim, is just drop dead gorgeous. And everybody thinks she married me for my money. You know, she didn't. I had no money, which, in fact, I was $800,000 in debt. But it was the best thing that ever happened to us because we had to work our way out of my stupidity. Now, the best way to get smarter is to be stupid and then figure out what you don't know. And that's what I'm saying right now. If you're looking in the mirror today, you go, how did I get into this mess? If you think it's coronavirus that got you here or the Fed, you're missing the point. You know, you're your biggest asset and you're also your biggest liability. But if you
Amen.
blame somebody else for it, you want the government to take care of you, then Grunch has won.
Yep.
You become a socialist, you go into communist.
That's actually a telltale symptom of someone whose consciousness has been compromised to me is someone who is looking for something from the outside to come in and save them and bail them out because they've given up on their own innate capacity to produce health, wealth, happiness, all of it. And the more you are deceived into that, the more that deception works its way into your consciousness where you believe you do not have the power to support yourself, you believe you don't have the power to heal yourself, you believe you don't have the power to defend yourself, then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and it becomes a slow spiritual death. You are much more powerful than you think and believe. Do not let them convince you otherwise.
Well, the problem starts in your head when your parents tell you to go to school, get a job, work hard, pay taxes, save money, get out of debt, and invest for the long term in a well-diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and ETFs. That's the embedded command from Grunch. You know, I was a student with Tony Robbins. He says they have hypnotic trances they put in you. Go to school, get a job, work hard, pay taxes, save money, and invest for the long term in a well-diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and ETFs. That's the kiss of death. It's in your head.
What the Catholic Church say, give me a kid before the age of 7 and I got him for life. It's all memes, right? It's all mental programming. Correct. There's so much to that. And I want to, we'll dissect a lot more of it in the film that's coming, soon. But let's just dissect one part of it because a lot of the things that you just said for my audience are cringeworthy. So let's just dissect save money. Wait a minute. What the hell is that guy talking about? You're telling me not to save money? Let's talk about why saving money doesn't work in a credit/debt-based economy.
Well, in 1971, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, which meant they could print it. So what happens is they can print they don't need your savings. They can just print money. It's called debit and credit. It's so obvious. So, I'm saving money, but they're paying you nothing, zero interest rate policy, and they're going to print. It took $4.5 trillion to save us from the 2008 crisis. It's estimated it's going to be $8 to $10 trillion the next crisis. That's going to make your dollar worth less and less and less. So why would you save it? Oh, no, I'm supposed to save money. That's good, but I would save gold, silver, or Bitcoin simply because they're outside the system of the Fed, the Treasury, and the government and Wall Street. So I say it's gold, silver. Gold and silver are God's money. Gold and silver have been here since the earth was formed. And Bitcoin is people money. It's open source money. It's computer blockchain. Oh, no, I'm going to save money. I'm going to go back to college. I'm going to get a job. And I'm trying to say something to you is I don't need a job because I create my own assets. 25 years ago, I created the cash flow board game. I hate to say this, they're sold out, but that's a good problem to have. But anyway, they should be coming in soon. I don't know when, but our business is booming because we prepared for this time. And I have more than enough money because I didn't save dollars. I saved gold and silver. Now, I don't know anything about Bitcoin because I'm an old guy. But Bitcoin is open source blockchain. It's people's money. You're protected from the central bank, the Fed, and the Treasury, and Wall Street.
Why do you think they hate it so much?
Yep.
They've been trying to shut it down since day one. And what happens with gold in times like this? All of a sudden the value goes up. So suddenly you've made a bunch of money on the value of your gold because people understand when the shit hits the fan, people understand that the stuff that's being printed is fake.
Yep. And the financial planners tell me, the S&P has gone up. I said, yeah, but gold in the year 2000, I think it was $250, and today it's $1,800. What happened to the S&P? Well, it went down.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't. And the worst part about it, like, you can't get cash flow gains. You can't get gold and silver, although the price is coming down, because gold and silver, the price of it is manipulated in the futures market, in the paper market. So that's what study does. You go, okay, that's what they're doing again. I can smell it. So you can go call your gold dealer right now and say, can I buy gold or silver? They say, no, we can't. We're out. But the price the price is going down. Think about that.
Yeah, that sounds fishy to me.
Yep. Well,
listen, this is a vast subject and we're running out of time. And I just wanted to introduce you to my audience. Robert and I have grown to be fast friends. We're having a good time watching this news together and just, commenting and texting and getting on calls and being like, holy crap, look at this, right? And there's never an article. I mean, every half day, there's just a stunning article that's coming out in this era that is just like front and center Jekyll Island, front and center grunge. And so, just folks, wake up, right? If not now, then when? Are you going to do cocktail hour with your friends, or are you going to illuminate yourself and find your spirituality and find your purpose and understand the trap and spring the trap and then do so for all the people around you, right? No one's here selling you a $50,000 thing. This isn't like some infomercial. This is just two guys that care for you, that want to make sure that you understand that there's something else going on as well that you also have to be careful about.
So if I could add this here on spirituality, I didn't come to spirituality on Pedram's path. I came via the U.S. Marine Corps and the military school, and I went to military school in New York. And the first word we're taught is mission. Mission is spiritual. What is your life's purpose? And one of the lessons I learned from Buckminster Fuller was, the more people I serve, the more effective I become. So the reason Pedram and I are doing this is nice to make money, but we do it for one purpose, is to serve more people, to give you another point of view out there that this pandemic is real, but I think the biggest crisis is financial. They're here to steal your wealth via your money, your mind, your spirit, and your soul right now. They're here to steer your soul. So just remember, the U.S. Marine Corps, we were here to serve people. My mother and father served in John Kennedy's Peace Corps. So the most important word today is not money, but service. How can I be of service to my fellow human being on our planet? That's what I'd like to leave you with.
Amen. Robert Kiyosaki, look, folks, just Google him. He's all over the place. I wish there was, the board game's great. I have a kids version that we play with our kids right now. It's been a wonderful growth curve and education for me. Look, I went to school, I became a doctor, I did that thing, and then I realized it was all bullshit. It took me a while. I'm not that smart. I'm thinking very differently about money and assets and real assets and what cash flow means and what, the store of value is. And I invite you to do the same. It's, you're not going to get all the answers right here. You're just going to have more questions. That's the beginning of your real education. So go Google Robert Kiyosaki's work, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And look, we're gonna do more of this. Robert and I are having very interesting conversations that I have been interested in sharing with you all. So let me know how you enjoy this, and I'll be back. Robert, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Can I give you one tease? The tease is this: the Fed doesn't need money, and neither do you. Once you understand mental, emotional, physical, spiritual money, you won't need money. It takes real financial education and transformation. Think about that. Till we see you again. Thanks for listening to our program.
Love it. Thank you all. This is Dr. Pedram Shojai, the Urban Monk. We'll see you next time.